Towards the end of chapter 2, you're provided with a framework for strategic blended learning planning. This makes our job a lot easier because it helps you go step by step by step for the planning piece. And there are 5 steps in here. I'm going to discuss the first 4 steps, and then Jeannie's going to talk about the last step. So step 1 is to identify desired academic outcomes. So that's when you ask yourself, what goals or what outcomes do I want at the end of this lesson? What do I want them to learn? What are my academic outcomes? So still not talking about technology, haven't even discussed it at all. We are literally just focusing on what do we want our kids to learn by the end of this lesson. Step 2 is to select a goal-aligned instructional strategy that works. So this is where you ask yourself, how am I going to reach that outcome? What am I going to do to reach that outcome? How am I going to teach the information? And later throughout the Canvas course, you're going to learn about, I believe we talk about 5 or so different instructional strategies, but there's even more than that in the book. So as we go, you'll learn about those different instructional strategies and how to choose which one works best with your goals and your outcomes. I want to remind you again, we still have not even talked about technology. This is all the academics right now. Step 3 is choosing your digital tool. So now that you know, what do I want my kids to learn? How am I going to teach it to them? You can ask yourself, what digital tool will support my instructional strategy? And we talked about this in the last videos. It's not technology first, it's the academics first. And now we want to know what digital tool will support that instructional strategy. I want to pay close attention to on page 209, there is a whole list of Weston's top 30 ed tech tools. All of these are wonderful, wonderful technology pieces that you could incorporate and use in whatever instructional strategies that you decide. This is something I would make a copy of and keep it really close to my desk when planning. It's very helpful, a nice list to have. So finally, for me, step 4 is to actually plan your blended instruction. So this is where you sit down and you're going to do your full lesson plan on the meat of your lesson for that day, and including the blended piece, the technology piece, and how are you going to use the technology piece to meet the academic goals that and the instructional strategy that you're going to use. So now Jeannie's going to talk about step 5.
So step 5 is really kind of hard for all of us because here we are self-assessing our plans and our progress with the framework. And it's kind of like an ultimate insurance policy, all right? It's going to ensure that mistakes do not go unnoticed. So we want to be strategic. We want to, and being strategic, it's really going to greatly increase the odds of reaching our desired goals. And so Kishnik talks about the rigor and relevance framework, and that's Daggett's work from 2016. And in it, it's built upon 2 continuums, and I'm going to go ahead and explain this further in this chart in just a minute. So we have a vertical axis. The vertical axis is the knowledge taxonomy, and it pertains to levels of rigor and is derived from Bloom's revised taxonomy. The horizontal axis here, that relates to relevance for our students. And it pertains to how the knowledge is put to use and to what degree of complexity and relevance. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain a little bit. So in quadrant A, this is where you've got knowledge in one discipline. The teacher's really doing most of the work. She's asking questions, and it's very low rigor, and it does not relate to anything, any future career, okay? So we have knowledge in one discipline, and it moves along a continuum to basically knowledge in any discipline to knowledge across all disciplines, moving all the way into real world, unpredictable situations, okay? So then we have quadrant B. So yeah, we can make it relate to the student's future career, but we still don't have the rigor. We don't have that knowledge base that we need, okay? It's still low. If we move up our vertical axis, here we have where the students are simply remembering, all the way up Bloom's taxonomy, where we know that creating is of the highest goal that in which we want to reach. So here we might have some really, we're turning the tables, and we as teachers, we've increased the rigor and the questioning and the thought, the complexity of thinking for our students, but it still does not really apply to them. So sure, they can create something, but it's not going to have meaning to them where they can recall it later. D is where we want to be. We want our students to know that 100% of their schoolwork that they do applies to their future. And that's what is so critical. So here we have high level of thinking, and it applies to their future career. And Kieschnick, in the book, as Julia mentioned, in terms of technology, he also has on page 205, if you think to yourself, well, I'm not really good with questioning. What questions, how do I know if I've reached the level of rigor and relevance that I need for my students? Well, you can turn to page 205, and here there are teacher question stems by quadrant. Also, if you look on page 207, what I really like here also is there is technology use by quadrant. So if you want to, and I'm not saying that we all need to be here immediately. We're not going to get there immediately. It is going to be a process. We want to work through our quadrants and play with each so that we become familiar with what is low level, what is high level, and how can I get there. So when you're here, you may be asking your students to create a bullet or a list of something using technology, okay? That's just showing knowledge of something. We can advance all the way eventually to D, where we want to be, and that is maybe they're doing animation, right? Maybe they're doing collaborating across the board with one another. This is where we want to be, and this is where it would apply to them for future. Okay, great chapter 2.